Nikki over here.
Everybody ready?
So,
This is my good friend, Margaret Scotty McCarthy, but it's always Scotty. She's been a quilter since the early 90s from Ardata, Colorado. She became involved in teaching quilting and volunteering at the kids camp at the Rocky Mountain Quilt Museum, and she'll talk a little bit more about that and what that entails. She's volunteered for over 24 years at the museum in various capacities as a docent on the board of directors, fundraising committee, teaching classes, and display viewer quilts at the museum and Colorado quilt shows. So let's give it up to Scotty, and you'll help hold quilts, or you're going to want to say?
Taking pictures. Well, I mean, in general,
So, has anybody here been to the Rocky Mountain Quilt Museum? Yay! 2, 3, all right. On the tables is a brochure. We are 35 years old this year. We were founded by a little tiny woman called Eugenia Mitchell, and at the age of 80, she founded the museum, and she donated the first 100 quilts to our collection. And she was quite a character. There are a lot of stories about her. She washed her quilts with Lysol, for instance, and she would go to bed with a quilt on top of her, and if she woke up in the middle of the night, the needle's right there, and she would quilt. And we have one of her quilts with a needle in it. So anyway, she was a character, and we are so tickled to be 35 years old. We are about to expand this year, and we're going to buy another part of our building, and we will almost double our size. We have 2 galleries. Right now we have 2 shows up. I'm going to have a senior moment here. The small gallery is the American Quilt Study Group. It is the 19th Century Blues. And the other one is the Star. It'll be Martin. Yes, Miss Martin. She has her star. We have our stars up in the gallery, and so that is quite a show. And we change our exhibits every 3 months. And we're open 7 days a week, just about all year round, except for a few days. Anyway, a little more on my background. I went to college wanting to do museum research. And I ended up being a paralegal. I couldn't afford to get a PhD at the time. And then about 25 years ago, Opal Fry, who was our executive director at the time, came to my guild meeting and gave a trunk show. And she said, "Oh, we need volunteers." And I hadn't even known there was a quilt museum. And I was out there that next week, and I haven't left. So I do a lot of different things. We have a lot of different shows. There's several men in this audience, and I would put a plug in because we have a men's show coming up, and the deadline is this spring. We have had a men's show every other year for the last 35 years. We get quilts in from all over, even out of the country sometimes. So go to our website and take a look and get your quilts in. That would be nice. So next Saturday, I'll do this before I forget. Next Saturday, I'm doing kind of a workshop, and these are just fun things. I like to teach kids, and I like to teach people to do things out of their box. How many here have to use a pattern? Yeah, I know there are a lot of you. When I teach kids camp, I don't give them patterns. Like this year, I'm going to be teaching them log cabins. I'm going to show them how. I'm going to show samples of log cabin quilts, and then I turn them loose. And they pick their own fabrics. If they want to do centers in them, and they do that, or if they want to change them around, they will do it. And in 1 week, they will design, piece, and quilt their own quilt about 50 by 50. And they will do 4 other projects during the week, from 9 to 3, and they are from ages 8 to 15. And then we have a quilt show. And it is so much fun to have the quilt show because at the end of the 2 weeks, they bring all their family and friends, and they get to stand so proud next to the quilt and show it off. And then we take the quilt show in September to our quilt affair, which is our state conference. And they hang there also. So that's one of the things I'm really, really proud of. And you'll learn some of the things on Saturday. We're going to do drawstring bags. This one I found at a garage sale, which is really kind of fun because inside it has a surprise. It's a whole sewing kit. We're going going to do these, candy wrapper bags. The kids love these. You can use potato chip bags, candy wrappers, you name it, and they are really fun. And I've learned how to make them now with Velcro instead of zippers, but you can do both. So that's a couple of the things we're going to do next Saturday for fun. You're going to just kind of do outside your box. All right, now. Anyway, Victorian crazy quilts. So the earliest forms of crazy patchwork we knew until recently dated back to the 1100s. They have now found in the ancient Egyptian tombs some possible scenes that show that they actually had quilted patchwork back then. So that's BC, I mean, that's a long, long time ago. There's a Chinese kimono that dates back to about 1152 that was quilted. Well, think about it. They didn't have heat or anything like that, so they did quilt their clothing. Crazy patchwork arrived in America about 1876 at the time of the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition. And they had a pavilion by the Japanese. And the Japanese had Japanese ware, which is cracked ware. And the women really liked that. Cracked ware in the Japan work, they would put gold in between the broken pieces of pottery, and that was good luck for one thing. But the women got the idea that, boy, we could do this with fabrics. And they started doing patchwork. This is also the time of Queen Victoria, and a lot of asymmetrical work at that time. This is an example of an early crazy quilt, and I'll explain some of these later. Queen Victoria was the Queen of England and the Empire for a very, very long time. She died in 1901, but she adored her husband. She was the monarch from 1837 to 1901. Her husband, Prince Albert, died in 1861, and she went into mourning for the rest of her life. This had an influence on fabrics because she wore nothing but blacks and grays and dark purples. Now you look at the fabrics from the 19th century, they are darker in hue anyway, but that's because of the dyes. But also when she did this, the fabrics, a lot of them were made strictly in those darker colors. She had 9 children and 42 grandchildren. There was also an industrial revolution during this period. There was a lot more wealth. Families had more wealth to do things. And women were allowed to stay home, and they learned a lot about the arts. They learned poetry. They learned to paint. They learned to quilt and sew and embroider. And these were all things that leisure ladies could do because they had a vacuum cleaner. Of course, it weighed 50 pounds, but they had a vacuum cleaner. And they had maids often, even in the middle class. So with this industrial revolution, you find that they spent a lot more time doing the embroidery, and the men loved it because they could show off their work. Oh, my wife doesn't have to work, you know. So this is something of a status symbol for him. And this is a picture of Prince Albert. So, oh yes, how do you make a crazy block or crazy quilt? It's an asymmetrical piece of fabric. What you do is you start out with a piece of odd-shaped fabric and put it in the middle of the block. It can't be square. It has to be odd-shaped, maybe 5-sided, and you put that in there. And then you take another piece of fabric, and you're using a foundation, and you put that on top, and you sew that down and open it up and cut. And then you put another one on top, sew it down and open it up, and cut in odd shapes. This is how it got started. And I'll show you some quilts that with the foundation on them. They used paper and they used other foundation. Now this piece I'm keeping in the bag because it's getting so fractured, but we can pass this around. At the museum we have a collection of education quilts that we allow people to touch. So that's really nice. They're not the highest quality of quilts or anything, but you are allowed to touch these, and I will be handing these around. So it's okay. This one I would prefer you leave it in the bag or go up and look at it. This has a date on it of 1873. And what they did here was that they used newspaper as the foundation. So it's falling apart, but pass that around, and you can see, you can even date the newspaper by some of the things on the back. This one over here we'll pass around later, but it also shows the foundation on the, oh, we can pass this around now too. Let me show you the back first. This is the back of this quilt. They used whatever extra pieces of fabric they might have or left over. They, in this case, they even had like a feed sack or flour sack, which comes up later. But look at the stitches that come through. So each block was made differently. This one is from 1911. This is a great block here. So turn it around. So this quilt was made in 1911, which is a little bit later. It is more of a utilitarian quilt, but it has a lot of elements that the women used. This block, for instance, is painted. It's got the date in here, and it's got the shatterings. Now the problem with the Victorian crazy quilts is a lot of silks were used in these quilts. Silks were made and then they were sold by weight. So they were weighted with chemicals and salts. After 80 to 100 years, they shattered. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Which is really, really sad. So many crazy quilts are doing, this is shattering right here. It looks like a cat just scratched it. So anyway, you can pass this around and look at it closely. We'll talk about the embroidery and the stitches later, but I wanted to show you the foundations.
Go ahead and pass it.
Yes. Just be very careful with them. They're getting very, very fragile. So there you can see up close, that's 1873, that's the Tomono one passing along. This is a nice little pansy that's in here, and I'm going to talk about the symbolism in a minute. Now, a lot of things in the Victorian era had symbolism. For instance, flowers. There is a whole language of flowers, and this was used in so many of the quilts. So what do these mean? Well, a tulip means imagination and perfect love. A variegated tulip means, oh, you've got beautiful eyes. Daffodils meant unrequited love and chivalry. Daisies were innocence. Lily of the valley was happiness and humility. And dogs were a sign of loyalty. Peacocks or peacock feathers meant incorruptibility. So women would incorporate these symbols into their quilts because they couldn't speak out about a lot of things, but they could put them in their quilts. They could do a lot of things in their quilts, which is really kind of fun. They also, the fans were used a lot, and you'll see fans in a lot of these. Spiders and spider webs are very interesting because they were symbols of good luck. And one theory is that for spiders, it said David was being pursued by King Saul and his soldiers with nowhere else to hide. And he ran into a cave, and a spider saw his plight and wove a web over the entrance to the cave, and the soldiers walked by. And he later became king. So that is one of the theories, or superstitions, or whatever your stories about why spider webs are in quilts. And you will see spider webs in many, many crazy quilts. There's more of the symbols here, the flowers. Okay. The most crazy quilts, original crazy quilts, were not made for utilitarian purposes. The early ones were made to show off. They were made to put over the piano or on the back of the chair to show off your stitches. Later on, they were made for utilitarian, and they were often tied. They did not have batting in them. Some of them did not even have backs, but that's the way the original ones were done. So it was called a crazy quilt craze. They were made with the satins and silks that the women used to make their dresses, and their gowns, or they would even go buy bags of the leftover scraps from the people who did the sewing, the milliners. Fans were very, very popular, and you will see fans in so many of them. You will see initials. You can see the initials here, and this is a close-up here with the EJJ. I wish they would put initials, words, yes.
So are these pictures of quilts that are in the collection
Yes.
of the museum?
These are actual pictures of quilts that we have in the museum. We don't know where they came from. We don't know who made them necessarily. You'll see a few that we do, but this is what some of them are. The stitching was amazing. They learned a lot of different stitches, and there's a whole collection of things, the different ones. Embroidered flowers. You can see this is 1908 up at the top. It was either made in 1908, maybe it was a child born in 1908, maybe it was a child or somebody who died in 1908. Often these quilts reflected what happened in the families. This one I didn't bring with me, I was limited to one suitcase, but this one is kind of interesting, and it has wheat all over it. And so you kind of guess, I wonder if he was a farmer. Yeah. You have to think about what they were actually doing, because that often did that. It reflected their lifestyles. Now, in the Victorian days, people would go to parties and meetings and skating shows and what have you. Then they would get a ribbon. But also, men smoked. And it became an advertising boon for the smokers, because they would put these little silks in the packages of cigarettes. And the women loved them and took these silks and put them in their quilts. Yes. And we had, this is one of butterflies. There are hundreds of different patterns out with the cigar silks and cigarette silks. So that one was probably made to make a pillowcase cover, but it has the silks in it. They also had, in the cigar boxes, they also had little flannels. And often these were flags of countries. Many of them no longer exist. But they were bigger, and these were in the cigar boxes. We had an exhibit at the museum a couple of years ago of a woman who has actually made quilts out of sets and sets of these cigar silks and cigarette silks.
Yes, so it is.
It's really, really fun.
Yeah.
If they went, I don't know if we have a ribbon in any of these. When we show you these, we'll see if there are any ribbons. There are ribbons for going to skating matches, political parties, things like that, and that often gives you a clue as to what was going on in the family or what they were like. This one we have in here, it's not theoretically a crazy quilt, but it is crazy because of all of the different materials in it. This is a much newer piece. It's synthetics, but look at all the stitching around it. It's a two-sided quilt. So she's stitched on one side. One side is plain and the other is not. It's one out in our collection. Now, Janet Finley is one of our museum people, and she wrote a book on quilts in everyday life. And she has probably the largest collection of cabinet cards in the nation. Cabinet cards are the photographs that were made, and people could get their photograph and it would be on a card. They were about like this. She has probably over 1,000 of them with quilts on them. So I'm going to show you some of these because they're really kind of fun. I told you about skating parties. Look at the crazy quilt this gal is wearing. With her skates. And some of these you can see, she has researched them, but it was very popular in the mid-1880s. Now this is a modern kimono. This is modeled by one of the gals in our shop, but it's really kind of fun, and it's a crazy quilt. But it is a modern one. I've made one. This is my one attempt at crazy quilt. I won't model it, but somebody else can. So I made a vest probably 25 years ago. Turn it around and look at the back too, because it is a crazy quilt. I used linens and different things in it, and lace and so forth. So this is a hint of what some of the modern ones are more like. And I jump back and forth a little bit on this. Here's another one of her cabinet cards. The photographer would appear at the home or the farm, and he would take their picture, but of course lighting in their houses wasn't very good, so they often would hang a quilt out on the porch and take pictures out on the front porch. And look at his short pants. Well, you can't really see him too well, but he's in his pants. He's outgrown his pants. Here's another crazy quilt that was used as a backdrop. Flossie and Minnie. This is from about 1884. You can see that one is tied. They often tied these crazy quilts. This is more of a utilitarian quilt, probably a farm family, so they used it actually on the bed. This one has a ship on it, and it's really kind of fun. I don't know who the BBB is, but it may be somebody's initials. Maybe he was a sailor. It's quite possible, but this was on one of them. This is a more modern one again too, but it's really fun to see the things that people put on the quilts. Initials were quite frequently put on quilts. Initials are hard to do and trace. I'm a genealogist and we hate just having initials. You can't figure them out. You want the whole name, thank you very much. So anyway, this one has the initials. And I'll show you another one in a little bit. Let's get more close. This is more of a modern one. This is synthetics. So this would have been done in the early 20th century. And unfortunately, we don't know who made these.
They're all donated.
Yep, these are some of them in our collection.
Were some of them from Eugenia?
Yeah, one or two of them may have been from Eugenia. Eugenia collected quilts. There's one other story about her. She was driving along in her car, and she's a little thing, and she had to drive looking through the steering wheel, and she saw a man on the ground changing the oil under his car lying on a quilt. You can imagine what she did. She went over and she said, "Get out of there, give me that quilt, here's $10. And she did that. She would rescue quilts. Now this is a little different. You can see this is a contained crazy, because each block is contained. That isn't very common. The contained ones were rare. This one doesn't have a lot of different stitches either, but it's an interesting style, and because most of them are not contained. Here's a close-up of that one. But you can see all of the different pieces that are put together for the crazy block. This was a pillow cover. And so it's got the date on it, which is very nice, and it's got Edna Johnson on it. It's got her full name. It also has the other names of the family. It's got Ruth Dunn. So something like this you can actually trace and research. I'm a researcher. I need names. The embroideries were beautiful in many cases. They did birds and flowers, as I explained, but all kinds of symbols. There will be religious symbols, and just lots of fanciful things. This is a crazy touching stars. Look at each of those stars, which is really fun. And this one, it was donated to us. It's really quite beautiful. This one has an interesting story to it because of the painting in the middle. Eugenia Mitchell met a woman who was in one of the Japanese internment camps. We had 2 internment camps in Colorado, and she met this woman, and the woman gave her this hand-painted piece from Japan. And then Eugenia actually made it a crazy quilt around it, and we were very fond of this quilt. We're going to have a Japanese exhibit later on this year with some of the internment camp paintings. So we do have a name for that one, where it came from. Let's see if I can pull that up.
Did you see it?
Sometimes they would put lace around the outside. And they would do tatting and make their own lace sometimes, and sometimes they buy lace. But this one might have probably went over a table, about that size. It has No initials on it. You can see the bird up here in the middle. See there's a crane there. Let's see if I can pull this and make this come up a little bit like my side. Here it is. Yeah. See, there's a bird here. And you can see some of their scissors. She was probably a seamstress. The fan, I don't see. There's a key. You look at them, and every time you look at them, you see different. You can see different things. So you kind of guess what the families were like and how they did it. Often they had velvet around the outside. This one is a beautiful quilt. It's in actually very, very good condition. It has birds and flowers in the corners. You can see the detail. It has the fans in the corners also. Here's a little embroidered flower. It says 1884 right there. So we have a good idea when that was made. Here's a close one. This one is really, really sweet, Millie. And you can see, who's that up there? Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf. Exactly. But it has lots of different stitches, butterflies, different things. But yeah, the Little Red Riding Hood one is fine. But all we know is Millie. We don't know if Millie is the one who made it or if it was made for her. You can see some of the flowers, and some of the flowers are there. This one in the corner says 1883, and it's got her name in it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So where we see they have the curved pieces, are those applique or are they sewn together?
They're all sewn together. Some are applique on top, but primarily the blocks are all sewn together, as you will see when we pass this around. And what they do, this one has a piece here that's applique on top. So they do a variety of things. This has an applique piece on top as embellishment. But primarily they will work on the blocks and do the piecing, and then they'll come back and add other things. They will also paint. And this one has painting on it. They will paint the blocks and paint flowers on it. It's one of the other arts that they worked on. Now, the utilitarian ones, as we've done before, utilitarian ones don't have much embroidery or anything on them. They are still very, very good. This is an interesting one. This was made in 1920, or I'm not sure when it was made, but it's got several dates on it. We call this the Rideout quilt because it is from the Rideout family. And if you look at it, it has March 25th, 1922, and initials. This one is Lita Rideout, 1897. She's got all of her family on here. More initials, a flower, March 1919. This is a utilitarian quilt. It is made with jackets and all wools and different pieces of clothing. But it really is an interesting utilitarian quilt, and it's got all of her family on it and some very interesting stitching. Show the back also. You can see her stitching coming through. Now some people ask, why are so many of these without backs? They got tired. They were out of favor.
UFO!
You got it. Exactly. But you can see the foundation that they used. So she used the big piece of foundation down here and over there and applique all the pieces on top. And you can see what's happening up here. So there you can turn around and pass that around. But it's kind of fun. That's from the Rideout family. They were a Colorado family. This one, it doesn't look crazy, but we call it a crazy quilt because it's all silk scraps. Yeah. Now this one, this is modern. If you get the modern silk, it wasn't packed with the salts. So the modern silks don't disintegrate. But the early ones, anything before 1900, they were packed with silks and salts. They sold silk by weight. And if you,
It's so light.
yeah, silks from different parts of the world feel differently also. I mean, Asian silks are different from Indian silks from different areas. And so, but they would pack it with salts and different things. But this is, we call this one kind of a crazy also. Now, this quilt is one in our collection. I know quite a bit about this because I've researched it. This is a double-sided crazy quilt. And as I said, I like to do research. There are a lot of signatures on this quilt too. It was made in 1897, and it had one little signature that had a clue of where it was made. And it was made, it says Emma Trott, and it says Woolwich, Maine. That was my clue as to how to trace this quilt. I inventoried all the names on the quilt. I could not find them in Woolwich, Maine. I called a local historian, and he said, oh, they're in the next county over. They're on Westport Island. I go, oh, great. So I found every person on this quilt, with the exception of the people that were initials, and I was able to research this quilt. It's a two-sided quilt. It's crazy on this side. You can see there's no embellishments. There's no silks or satins. They didn't wear silks and satins in Maine in 1897 on an island where they were sailors and fishermen and so forth. So it was really, really fun tracing this quilt. This is Stella. She never married. She was a teacher. You can see her block. Stella Thomas, April 22nd, 1889. They were at 1887 to 1889, signatures on there. I have a picture of, and I have the quilt of the picture of her. When we hung this quilt, we hang this picture next to it. And it was really fun. I had one person in there, I docent, and this gal was looking at her picture and looking at the quilt and looking at her picture and looking, and she said, there's her plaid. The plaid of her neck. Yeah, it's in the quilt. It was really, really fun when she did that.
And you hadn't noticed it?
No. So this is her block, the whole block. And you can see the fabrics, and you can see it's just tied. The back side is all 24 patch blocks. Flags were quite popular to put into crazy quilts. This one has a flag and has a date, 1889, and initials. But the island is a 10-mile long island off the coast of Maine, north of Bath. And it now has a causeway over to it. And the people on that island were fishermen. They had a freshwater pond. They harvested ice blocks out of it that would go on the ships, and they would take them down to Boston. The founders of this island go back to the 1600s, and that's how they got the island. Now, stamps are interesting. This is a stamp down here. Women in Victorian days would have their own stamp often. Or they would have somebody put ink their things on there. Let's see if I can pull that up. Oh, I'm going to lose it. But that's a stamp, and it has, that's Grace Tanner. She was one of the ones on the quilt. While I was researching this, I found another quilt made by these same women 2 years earlier. Ours was actually found in Chicago at an antique store. A woman bought it and gave it to the museum. The other one was found at a garage sale somewhere on the East Coast. It had been cut in half, and she recognized the names and gave it back to the island. I have always wanted to get the two quilts together. I call them sister quilts. You can see there are a lot of cottons in this one. But it's an interesting, this is the sister quilt. Almost identical. And a lot of the same people in there, and some of the same signatures and dates, but just a little earlier. And there is a third quilt, a red and white quilt I've never seen, but it was documented by the Maine State Historical Society, also signed by these, dated 1870.
They were busy.
They were busy, and I don't know why the quilts were made. They were made, they may have been auctioned off. They may have been given to somebody who was leaving the island. We don't know. But most of the people on the quilt were related. This is a utilitarian quilt again. This is just a piece of one. Now this is one This is one I'm very familiar with because it's one of my family quilts. So this hangs in New Jersey at my aunt's house. She is 92, and one of you ladies knows her. Yes. This hangs in her hallway in the stairwell. And it's really an interesting quilt because it has the S on it. This is my great-great-grandmother. And unfortunately, when she passes and they take this down, it's going to totally disintegrate. It's been hanging since 1991 on the wall, and nobody's touched it, but it will disintegrate. And I've told my cousin that when she does it. There's just no way we're going to be able to save it. But there's the S, and her embroidery was just beautiful. But EIS, there's only one, Edward Irwin Scott, so we know that's him. And he and his brother founded Scott Paper Company in Philadelphia in 1876. But she did beautiful embroidery. So I'm very proud of this quilt.
And that's where you got your name, Scott.
Yeah, it's my family name. Here are pictures of them. So when I like to trace the history of quilts, I like to find the pictures of them. It just makes it more personal, and you have more of an idea of who the people were and what they did. So I always like to do that whenever possible. Yeah, it's a beautiful one. This block I meant to bring, but this is also a block that I have that was probably made by her also, or it could have been her, I think her mother's. Yeah, it's beautiful. And these exquisite ones are just very, very, hard because of the silks. This one is a 1955 quilt. So they made crazy quilts. They're still making crazy quilts. I'll show you some modern ones. This one is actually, we put this in, even though it's a half-log cabin, it is all velvets. And it was probably made as a wagon throw, to throw over you and keep you warm when you're out on the wagons. It also is 1960s. This is another one, the Thousand Pyramids. It also was made out of scraps of velvets, and they're both very heavy quilts to keep you warm. So why make crazy quilts? Modern crazy quilts. Who makes modern ones? Anybody here make crazy quilts?
Well, we just did the crazy.
Yeah, that one. And we got one in the back.
Right, and I'm working on
Okay, before we go to the modern ones, I'm going to show these other two because then we'll talk about modern ones. And I'll point out some of the things. Yeah. This one even has yo-yos on it. Yeah. So it's got beautiful stitching on it. So she really was a seamstress. Look at this. It looks like a wheel. Could have been a ship's wheel. She's got several of them in here. It's got the yo-yos. She's got lots of different stitches. This is a mirror. Let's see what else. Painted. This is painted fabric. This is now, sometimes they would cut out fabric that's already embroidered and things and work that in. You just find lots of different things. This is painted fabric here also. So look at that when it comes around. A pansy. Look at this bird over here, that's painted. This one, she was really a beautiful seamstress. And you can show the back also, I don't think that this is 1880s, 1890s. Yeah, no doubt about it. It just doesn't have a date on it. It's in good shape. There aren't any silks on that one, so that's why it hasn't shattered. Yeah, a little bit of that, but yeah. No, actually these, that could be a silk, but it doesn't have the salt in it, yeah. So anyway, you look at that one. That's a really fun one to look at. So we'll pass that around. This one has kind of a fun block on it. You'll have to look at it. It's got the alphabet.
Were those blocks hand stitched together?
Yes. Yeah, they would have been hand stitched. Even though they had sewing machines were available from about 1860 on, they would have hand stitched together. This one, you can feel how heavy it is because it does have a backing on it and it's velvet on the sides. This one's really, I brought this one because it's really in the best condition. There are a couple of condition areas, but This is fun. Spider web, right there, the spider web. This one is very sweet. It says, I don't care what the daisies say, I know I'll be married some fine day. Now here is a ribbon. This is an example of a ribbon, and it's a satisfaction ribbon for something. Look at her spider web. She's got ruche flowers. She's got a cat. Initials JB. She has a beautiful girl. Now this is silk. This is girl on it. There's a block here with owls that says two is company. I mean, I think she made this for her wedding. She obviously was very much in love. Look at this one that's painted or stamped on here. It has lots of different things to look at. And it has the initials, and you can see some of the areas that are done. Yeah, oh, what does it say?
Lager beer.
Yeah, lager beer. Oh, okay, lager beer.
That was for her husband.
But really, you can tell a story by looking at these quilts. Kind of get an idea for how, what they were like.
And she put something on the back there.
Yeah, I think there's a label on the back. Is there a label on the back?
This is just a piece of paper.
Okay, yeah, we just have some of that.
And here's the back, it's just a piece.
So those are the antique quilts. Do we have time to do some modern quilts? Okay. All right, so this is another modern quilt. Ties. This has ties in it. And some ties don't seem to disintegrate. They didn't have the same problem with being packed in rows. This is a modern block. Whoops, where did it go? There we go. We've got some modern blocks, very modern, made with ribbon. This is what's going on now, and then the embroidery stitches. So, here are the instructions on how to make a crazy block. Unless you're going to start with something like this. We have a gal in our museum named Rita Meyerhoff, who is an absolutely phenomenal quilter. She does long arming, she does embroidery, she does crazy blocks, she does not only just this one, but lots of them. This one you have to look out very closely. This one little block, a little quilt called Crazy Little Sweethearts, took about 100 hours. She teaches it. She teaches all of this in her embroidery. So this one is really, really special. Each block is different. She puts all kinds of things added to it. She'll put charms on it. She'll put lace. She'll use buttons. And so pass that around very carefully. The bottom will come off sometimes, so don't worry. Oh yes, this one she donated it to our Fabric and Friends auction, which we hold every spring. We have about 200 to 400 items, silent auction items, and then we have a live auction. And that year I couldn't go, so I gave Aurora my credit card. And I said, Aurora, I want that quilt, and I want that quilt.
But don't spend more than this amount.
That's more.
She got a deal.
Now she doesn't know that she was bidding against Rita's person because Rita was going to buy it back. So Rita has visiting privileges. And when I took it to the museum the other day, she said, oh. But it's really amazing. You have to look at that closely. So I have a bunch of her. So this is an idea. Where do you get crazy quilt ideas? Look at tiles. Look at all kinds of things, you get ideas. This is an idea of ideas to get crazy quilts. I'm going to go through this and then I'm going to show you. This is tile floors. So you get influenced by a lot of this. These are Portuguese tiles. Yeah. And they're just lots of different things. This is Rita in her home. And she started quilting in 1990. And she is an amazing volunteer at the museum also. So I got to go and look at her house and take a lot of pictures, so a lot of these are from her house. That's my Crazy Little Sweethearts. You can see that one there. She made that in 2015 and 2016. That's a close-up of a couple of the little blocks with the buttons. This is another one of her quilts, and I want to, when I get to this, I want to find the poem. There's a poem. that she wrote for one of her quilts. Yeah. They hang all over her house. This is her most recent one. Well, this would have been a couple of years ago, but this is another one that also, she spent 60 hours on this one alone. And she's got bigger buttons, and you can see she's got the dragonfly, lots of different things. And she never sleeps. Between this and this is some of the detail. She uses all kinds of fabrics and backgrounds, lots of stitches. Dragonfly again, and you can see those are moving up. And she has her own little shop in her house.
I've been in there.
That's her shop, and her long arm is just to the left of that in her living room.
She has a very, very wonderful husband.
Oh, well, I got to see his basement. He has the basement, and he has a train track that runs the entire place around the basement. So they're well suited for each other. So this is one of her house is decorated with, she uses a lot of personal items in them too. Look at the gloves. She'll use family pieces, or she'll use things that she finds, and that's her quilting. She is a phenomenal quilter. She does all free motion quilting on her own.
She quilted my quilt that got, the hexie quilt that went to Paducah, she custom quilted that.
Yeah. So she constantly does this, and they're really, really fun to see. Look at the teacup and the gloves, you get to see that. Her quilting is phenomenal. She'll do little things like add the pearls just in the corners. This is another one of her miniatures. These are about the same size or even smaller. They're only 3-inch blocks. She's got a rickrack and button on it, you can see. See the trim? She teaches classes in this. Look at all the detail. The detail that she has in each block is just phenomenal. You're welcome. Oh, her classes are amazing. This is one of hers that she was working on when I was in her house. I mean, she doesn't make just miniatures. She makes good sized, big quilts. Look at that. I mean, the lace. She uses hankies. Lots of modern things on it. And she doesn't plan it out. She just works on it and puts things where she wants. Yeah. Now one of these, I'm going to find it here because it's got a fabulous poem that goes with it. We had several of her quilts on display recently. But this is what these are modern crazies. See the fan? Yeah, the beading. The lace. Yeah. That's the back of one of her blocks. And she'll often use printed fabric on the back, but then she sewed a little button in each one of those dots.
Is that what I was?
Those are those are tiny little buttons, pearls, excuse me. They're pearls in each one of those dots. Yeah. This one is, I'm going to pull this one up, it's a little hard to see, but here she's pointing out all the different things that she's put into the quilt. And look at her quilting around the blocks too.
Yeah.
Gosh. Yeah, it's a little kid. It's like a baby. Makes them for herself. Her house is full of them. Or she'll donate them like to our auction and then buy them back. She didn't get mine back. Yeah, she does, she teaches and she does go around and talks. Look at the folded silk there. And this is a little girl here at the bottom. So you can hold it up. See the girl on the bottom. And buttons. Teacup. This is her steampunk quilt. That's what she calls it. That's her steampunk. Yeah. Yeah, it is different. But you can see the fabric she's used for background and some of the work she's put into it. It's not as heavily embellished as some of the others. There's a close-up. Look at the mannequin dress, or the dress one. Scissors. Scissors, yeah. She finds all these things all over the place. Puts them wherever she wants in the quilt. That's a key. You see the key? She actually added a key to it. It's a real key.
So sometimes Scotty does, like when you create this, you create a block and then you add the embellishments after the block is
Correct.
created.
She will do the piecing first,
Yep,
and then she will actually piece all of them together,
right.
unless her blocks are bigger. And then she will do the embellishments. Yeah. Look at the sewing machine there on the left. And you can see some of the printed fabrics that she uses too, which are really kind of fun. I like to feature it.
Is that like printed fabric or is that?
No, I think that it could be a printed fabric. It looks embroidered though. But the one to the left that's printed fabric with a house with a French. The left. Now, I'm thinking that because I want to find this poem because it is absolutely perfect, and I'll end with this. The poem is, because it really epitomizes all of quilting. Her labels, let me go to the labels, too, that's kind of coming up next. See the tissue, painting there, 2005. Okay, these are some of her labels that she puts on her quilts. I hope you all label your quilts. I beg the people to label their quilts. Please, please, please label your quilts. And if you have any antique quilts or family quilts, even if you don't want to sew a label on it, write it up, put a picture of your grandmother or great-grandmother with it, and pin it to the back of the quilt. It is called provenance. And when you're gone, no matter how many times you have told your family who made that quilt, they won't remember. We had a man come into the museum a number of years ago, and what happened was he said, "Oh, we're having a garage sale this weekend, but I've got a lot of quilts." And Karen and I went, "Can we come see your quilts, please?" And after we looked at his quilts, and they were beautiful quilts, pristine condition, made by his mother and his grandmother, we said, "Why don't you get an appraisal?" A $30,000 appraisal of 10 quilts later, they did not go to the garage sale for They don't know. They don't have the appreciation. But if you put a label on them, it helps. These are her labels. Now I'm going to read this poem because it is really beautiful. Right here. A lifetime of learning, old and new, handwork and embroidery, needle punch and silk ribbon work, accordion roses and bullion roses, ribbon and satin and spider roses, blanket, bullion and herringbone stitches, fern, feather and fly stitches, running, satin and straight stitches, laces and woven stitches, buttonhole and lazy daisy stitches, French knots galore, worth beyond beauty. Oh, that was the middle of it. Sorry, it's called My Secret Garden. It's filled with reminders of my favorite things: love of sewing, quilting, and tea, love of gardening and God's creation, flowers and plants, ivy and wheat, daisies, roses and violets, worth beyond beauty. Buttons connecting, buttons from my family, antique buttons, large and small, bumblebee, dragonfly, and flower and leaves, oval, round, and square, worth beyond. It's a beautiful poem, and that is the label that she has on the back of that quilt. So anyway, that is my show. There's the rest of the poem there. And it is working. So does anybody have any questions, or did anybody bring any crazy quilts? Yeah.
Just what was the name of that book that you have?
Oh, yeah. That is Janet Finley's book, and it is, I can show you, see, I go back to it. And I think it's still in print. Yeah. It is called Quilts in Everyday Life, 1855 to 1955. And it is by Janet Finley. It's a great book. It's a lot of fun to go through. She's got a lot of different stories about it. Anything else? Any other questions, comments? Yes?
I'm going to be in Colorado in September, so when do you guys update your class list in case that would work out?
Look on our website. We already have classes up right now.
But not until September.
Probably not until September. Just what you can do is request to be on the email list. We don't sell it. Call in and request to be on the email list, or go to our website periodically. We send out an email every Friday. It tells you everything that's going on at the museum, and we've got lots going on at the museum. So look at it and ask them what reader classes are. Her machine quilting class is phenomenal also. That's a great class to take. Rita, yeah. So anything else? Oh yeah, sign up at the back if you're going to come next Saturday, and I'll try and make it entertaining, and we'll have some fun doing some little projects. So thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.